Attention please. Please do not smoke in the terminal building. Smoking is only permitted in the specified smoking areas.
Zach?
Thank you.
OG, I draw up the plate, and then he go get the cake. Then we link up with the gang, gang, gang. OG, I draw up the plate, and then he go get the cake. Then we link up with the gang, gang, gang. OG, I draw up the plate, and then he go get the cake. Then we link up with the gang, gang, gang. OG, I draw up the plate, and then he go get the cake. Then we link up with the gang, gang, gang. OG, I draw up the plate. Niggas don't know what to think. Thought I get money, you change. What you thought we was the same? Still stay away from them clones. Niggas better leave me alone. Talking about niggas as though you run with niggas who don't know you. Whoa, I made that zagging when city to city. You niggas not hot in your state. If it was money to get a hit Henny, we get it and never complain. Same go for the gang, and we split it up all the same. I can't really eat, let's stay straight, cause we go way back in the day. My day ones from back in the day, they still hang around me today. You wanna come round us, you can't. I'm rolling up loud, it's great. But mama, she bad but complain, cause I'm too in love with my dreams. And I gotta get on the plane, and go get this money with Kenji. I draw up the plate, and then he go get the cake. Then we link up with the gang, gang, gang. OG, I draw up the plate, and then he go get the cake. Then we link up with the gang, gang, gang. OG, I draw up the plate, and then he go get the cake. Then we link up with the gang, gang, gang. OG, I draw up the plate, and then he go get the cake. Then we link up with the gang, gang, gang.
I get the bag with the gang, taking that Zach to the bank. And it be all in my drink. You niggas is stupid, you think that should change? You not even hot in your gang. Ain't nothing even hot about your gang. You niggas be lying about same. Be posting them pictures of guns for the fame. Niggas just look at me different now. Say that's your man, but he a clown. Don't fuck around with the fuck arounds. Little nigga, you should cut it out. Me and my niggas take different routes. Punch a bitch nigga all in his mouth. Hold up my nigga, we different now. I need a Robert, it's just my style. I get a check today, I spent it all tomorrow. I get a bitch today, she probably a foreign model. I get a check today, I spent it all tomorrow. I'm with my gang today, tomorrow never promise.
OG, I draw up the plate, and then he go get the cake. Then we link up with the gang, gang, gang. OG, I draw up the plate, and then he go get the cake. Then we link up with the gang, gang, gang. OG, I draw up the plate, and then he go get the cake. Then we link up with the gang, gang, gang. OG, I draw up the plate, and then he go get the cake. Then we link up with the gang, gang, gang.
I think I'm cute, I know I'm sexy. I've got the look that drives the girls wild. I got the moves that really move them. I send chills up and down their spines. I'm just a sexy boy. I'm not your boy toy. I'm just a sexy boy. I'm not your boy toy. Let's go. I make them hot. I make them shiver. Things get weak whenever I'm around. They see me walk. They hear me talk. I make them feel like they're God and real. I'm just a sexy boy. I'm not your boy toy. I'm just a sexy boy. I'm not your boy toy. Let's go. That mic flip though. Hands off the merchandise. I'm just a sexy boy. I'm not your boy toy. I'm just a sexy boy. I'm not your boy toy. I'm just a sexy boy. not your boy toy. I'm just a sexy boy. I'm not your boy toy. I'm just a sexy boy. I'm not your boy toy. I'm just a sexy boy. I'm not your boy toy. Welcome everybody to another edition of the Pocket Locker Podcast. I am your host with the most, all the way from the East Coast. And as always, folks, I am in... airplane mode. Folks, we've got another great one lined up for you. We are going to talk about how fuckface Bart Ehrman, according to fuckface Mike Winger, is misleading millions of fuckface Christians who are following fuckface Jesus. I don't even know. I haven't seen it. I don't know who's right. I don't know what to say. This is all crazy to me, but we're going to go ahead and get right on into it. Now, before we do, let me just be clear up front. I have a really mixed opinion of Bart Ehrman. Like, I think Mike Winger's an ass. I think Pauly G is pretty cool. I don't watch all Pauly G's stuff. His style's a little dry for me, but you know, his content was really big when I first got into this community. And Ehrman, like I'm like most of y'all. I love Ehrman when he goes against the traditional notions of Christianity. I wish I was more convinced of the historicist case as he was. I'm agnostic about Jesus. So, you know, that's kind of where we're at. But look, folks, let's go ahead and get into it. Before we do, y'all already know the drill. Let's go ahead and get into our communion. Please raise your glasses and hold on to your asses. Through him, with him, in the unity of the flying man. All glory and honor is yours who flied for our sins forever and ever. You may drink. Oh yeah, that's good. Got that communion whiskey. Get some energy drink. Church bells. That one is our communion hymn. Let's go ahead and get into our communion song. This one comes to us from the Brummies. It's our community's theme song. Here's Where Everybody Knows Your Name. Whoops. All right, I got Nerdy Rodent first. I gotta look at the trees second.
And they're always glad you care. You wanna be where you can see your troubles are all the same. You wanna be where everybody knows.
And I've got James Apperson.
People are all the same. You wanna go where everybody knows your name.
Appreciate that. Appreciate that. Ooh, wrong camera.
Show being modest. Now it's grams of the wax for my conscience. Brian James in LA, you're on college. I've been jumping on them planes like a hobby. Still moving with the pack like my partners. Just the John on them jets cause you wildin'. But the bowl is a party on the island.
Moment of silence.
So good, get back to the topic. Grew up, it was me and Flocka. Grandma's and Big T, this my mama. I ain't even for the pain when my pots flip. Knew his name, that's it, never bothered. Mom said, you the man, son, you got this. Ever since I found a way to go and pop shit. Hold up, blaze through a whole zip. Took a seat at the table of my first flip. Days in red roof with my first whip. Spent the money with the gang, never post pics. Seen a change in the game, had to coach it. Never let them take my wangs in the mold, bitch. Ever made in a month, nigga. Used to serve him at the minute, just the front, nigga. Goddamn. Had to grow up quick, I made my own rules. Had my first child, got it jumping with music. Can't really hang with nobody who losing. I thought by now that you would go and get it, but I could hardly see niggas this distant.
No, you get cropped if you not in the picture. Let's go.
And I made that tag and went got a bag. Shots to the Henny and OG prescriptions, put rebel shit on the map. Took a leap from where I started at. Started ballin' now, I'm Chris Paul and Cass.
Got him steady calling for the move, but I'm on a roll. Gotta call him back. That's all facts. Airplane mode, baby. You see the niggas on the street with the merch. And y'all know I'm jealous. Oh, I can't wait till we get our airplane mode. Look at that, the fucking clean ass shit with the trucker hat and shit, man.
All carry-on items should now be stowed
I want
securely
that
in
airplane
an overhead
mode
bin or
swag.
designated
That
section.
airplane mode
All
swag.
aisles, exits, and bulkhead areas should
Gotta
now
give
be
me
cleared.
some of that airplane
All
mode
electronic
swag.
devices should now
Get
be
the
turned off
airplane
and stowed
mode
as they
swag.
interfere
I
with
want the
aircraft
airplane
navigation
mode
and
swag.
communication systems.
Gotta get it, gotta order, gotta buy it. Cause I got to try it. All right, here we go, yo. All right, let us go ahead and get on into this. Didn't I say share the screen? Not the master video. Don't see it. There we go. All right, before we get into this, let's just clear the air. Paula Gia, you need to hit your boy up. You need to hit your boy up, Paul. I've been trying to avoid making this personal, but I know you've been nibbling around the bushes here. I know you seen my debate with Hovind. Hit me up. I know you did a video with my co-host, Uncle Bobby. Hit me up, man. We got a lot of things we could talk about. We got a very different presentation style, but look, of course, I'm a huge Paula Gia fan. When I first got into this community, you know, I was on Rationality Rules and Paula Gia and Genetically Modified Skeptic and Holy Kool-Aid. Okay, so let's just be clear about that. But can y'all picture your boy Pocket with the animation? You know what I'm saying? With the robe, with the sexy boy tights. I don't know. Y'all might even have to do it like it's promo style with the motherfucking belt wrapped around my waist while I talk this shit. Under the robe, man, come on. Do y'all look at this? Just think about that on Paula G. Come on now. With the hair and the headband and the robe with the tights, with the championship, just tearing down some motherfucking gang. Don't lie to me, gang. I know y'all want to see that shit. Y'all need to let Paula G know. Y'all need to be hitting them up every single video. See, we've been a little bit too friendly. We got to go back to doing what works, and that is straight up harassing people, gang. I got to start calling for it. Y'all already know the drill. Some of y'all are new here, so you don't know the drill. Let me teach you the motherfucking drill. See, we get so comfortable with each other that we forget that there's a lot of new people that have joined our community and they don't even understand what we're all about. They don't understand what the vision is. They don't understand what the purpose is. They don't understand the mission. They don't understand the personality. Are we friendly? Are we here to make friends? Are we here to debate? Are we here to educate? Are we here to conversate? We are taking over the internet. I have a one-track mind. That's all I care about. I wake up in the morning thinking about taking over the internet. I'm doing science throughout the day and teaching in the blase and the grading and the flavonoids. And all I'm thinking about is how the fuck can I get this done as soon as possible so I can get back to taking over the internet? Then I'm like, I guess I gotta piss and eat and take a shit and do laundry and let my dog out, but I really don't want to because all I want to do is take over the internet. So no, we're not here to make friends. So what you got to do is you go to this Paula G video. Look, I'm going to do it for you right now. I'm going to show you exactly how it goes. You just roll up down into the comment section. Man, y'all can't see. Look, here we go. Boop. Oh, I keep hitting the wrong button. You roll up down the comment section and you say, Paul. You probably already know this. Why can't I type when I'm looking to the side? But you really need to do something with at Pocket Locker 86. You guys would be amazing together. Yours truly, Pocket Locker 86. I'm not gonna sign it, but look, that's how you get down. That's how you get it. That's how you get boom like that. And I know Paul, don't do that, and we don't blah blah. I don't care. Just do it. Just put that out there. All right. And yeah, I would love to catch up with Bart Ehrman. Me and Bart Ehrman have a great conversation, but I don't really watch a lot of Bart Ehrman stuff on his channel. You know what I mean? So we probably link up at an academic conference or something like that. And fuck face Mike Winger. Ooh boy, would I love the opportunity to get all up in his goodies. All right, let's go for it.
And I'm going to play clips of Bart Ehrman for you, and I want to show you how they're absolutely, inarguably, demonstrably false and misleading.
Okay, well, if there's nothing to argue with, then I guess he's right. Perfect. If you can't argue otherwise.
If you
respect
Dave. Dr. Bart Ehrman, and he's brilliant. The guy's brilliant, and he's done a lot
Go
of smart
subscribe to
things.
Captive
Would it help
Desk
you know
Gang.
that Jim thinks you're smart?
No.
I'm not trying to be condescending here.
That's nice. Okay.
Laura, we lift up our family and friends right now who are perhaps being influenced by maybe Bart Ehrman or maybe just those who are quoting his material, that people would look at the actual word of God themselves and not see it through the filter of Bart Ehrman.
Wow. Okay.
All right, pause the fucking tape. I fucking love this shit already. Christians are so in this love-hate relationship with Bart Ehrman. We can all actually agree about this, right? Like that's the one thing we can all agree on, is that we're not quite sure how we feel about Bart Ehrman. I mean, on one hand, Christians love the fact that he is probably the best defender of the historicity of Jesus. And he's also one of the most articulate, sort of public-facing New Testament scholars. They love it. They love it. But it's like the inverse. It's like the yin and yang, right? He has that yin and yang going on. And it's literally like the symbol, right? Because the yin and yang, you've got the complementary shapes, and one's black and one's white, and there's the little fucking circles of the other color, whatever the fuck. And that's like what it's like. It's like Christians are like, yes, we love the fact that Bart Ehrman defends the historicity of Jesus, and we love the fact that he comes to churches, and we love the fact that he's so sweet and open-minded to Christian perspectives, but we don't really like that he's an atheist, and we don't really like that he's always calling out these contradictions in the Bible, and, you know, like, they just got that very uncomfortable feeling deep down in their soul. But we atheists are the same exact way. We love that Bart Ehrman is pointing out contradictions all over the Bible. We love that Bart Ehrman is an atheist who is just like, yeah, I study the Bible for a living, and there's no fucking way that shit about Jesus Christ is true, right? But a lot of us are like, ooh, but then he gets on to this historicity stuff and some of those other issues, and we're not so on the same page anymore.
Welcome to Apologia, where a former Christian takes a look at the claims of Christians, along with friend of the channel, renowned scholar Dr. Bart Ehrman.
You would just think, well, Bart Ehrman knows his stuff. He's a scholar. The guy's got like millions and millions of book sales. He's very highly regarded, and right, this is a guy I should trust.
Who has a course on the Book of Mark coming up.
This is an 8-lecture course on one of the most important pieces of literature in our civilization that almost very few people really understand what's going in the Gospel of Mark. I call it the unknown Jesus because my point in this course is to show why Mark is Mark and he's not something else. He is not given the message that John is giving or that Luke is giving or Matthew. And the thing about Mark is that Mark is trying to emphasize that Jesus is the Messiah and nobody understood it.
We'll get to more on that later, because on the topic of Mark, today we're going to be looking at a video. We'll get to more on that later, because
he's giving or Matthew. Unknown Jesus because my point in this course is to show why Mark is Mark and he's not something else. He is not given the message that John is giving or that Luke is giving or Matthew. And the thing about Mark is that Mark is trying to emphasize that Jesus is the Messiah and nobody understood it.
We'll get to more on that later, because on the topic of Mark, today we're going to be looking at a video from Pastor Mike Winger.
So are you going to go?
All right, so yeah, I'm always peeping out. Oh my goodness, my chair hates my robe. I'm always peeping different academic models for how these, researchers out here support themselves. Bart Ehrman's classes are really, really interesting. I'm about academics finding their way on the interwebs, and Bart Ehrman's always leading that charge. But yeah, it's just really interesting because I always sometimes feel like he's appealing to Christians. He wants to bring Christians into his audience, as so many of us do. But then it's really amazing to hear the direct fear-mongering that Christians do. Like, he really causes them so much anxiety. They're like, stay away from Dr. Ehrman, stay away from Dr. Ehrman, stay away from Dr. Ehrman. And it's really interesting. Like, I really do think at the end of the day, they really are convinced themselves that if Christians listen to Bart Ehrman, they're going to deconvert.
Battle dressed as a cool youth pastor.
A video that has received over 400,000 views called How an Atheist Scholar Misleads Millions of People, the Mark series. And that atheist scholar is you, Dr. Ehrman.
What?
So for numerous reasons, Dr. Bart Ehrman is incredibly misleading to people. And that's sad. That's very sad. And hopefully this kind of video is going to help fix that. So Dr. Bart Ehrman, the kind of the subject of today's study in the Gospel of Mark, for the most part, he's radically distorting Mark. I mean, radically, horribly distorting Mark, ignoring Mark entirely to construct a false contradiction here that is misleading and convincing to millions of people. Here we go. This is the clip.
And the mistake people make is pretending that what Mark has to say is the same thing that Luke has to say, and that what Luke has to say is the same thing that Mark has to say. These are two different gospels with two different points of view. And if you smash them together into one kind of mega gospel, you have ruined the emphasis of each one. Sometimes there are differences in emphases that really matter. Give you one example. Mark has a very powerful portrayal of Jesus going to his death. Jesus has been betrayed by one of his followers. He's turned over to Pontius Pilate, and during his trial, Jesus doesn't say anything to Pontius Pilate except Pilate says, "Are you the king of the Jews?" And Jesus says, "Su leges," you say so. That's all he says.
This section, these 5 verses, is what Bart Ehrman's referring to when he says that Jesus says nothing before Pilate except the phrase, "You say so."
I don't see how one can debate that Jesus doesn't say much. In his trial, he says 2 words, "Su leges," those the entire trial. And so, yeah, I think it's pretty safe to say he didn't say much.
He's taken out to be crucified. He doesn't say anything. He goes to the place of crucifixion. He's silent the entire way. They nail him to the cross, and he's silent.
So Dr. Ehrman wants us to think that Mark is saying the words he records that Jesus says are the only words Jesus says. Then it creates conflict with Luke, because if you go to another gospel, say Luke, John, and it has Jesus saying something during the discussion with Pilate, more than "you say so," if Jesus says something, then now it's a conflict, right? Now there's a contradiction between these things. But Mark doesn't actually say this. Mark never, in this whole passage, in the many hours of the day, it never says the only thing Jesus said during this 3 hours was this one phrase. And Jesus, it's true, he doesn't say anything in Mark's gospel. But there's a difference between Jesus doesn't say anything and Mark has Jesus saying nothing. These are very different things. Because in the same sense Jesus doesn't say anything, I could say that Jesus doesn't breathe. In fact, nobody breathes in the entire Gospel of Mark. If you've ever noticed this, but nobody breathed, as far as Mark wants to emphasize that nobody breathed in the first century because he never mentions anybody breathing.
That's a confusion of categories. When I'm talking about the Gospel of Mark, I'm talking about the Gospel of Mark. If I say, look, in the New York Times today, it said that Joseph Biden yesterday said X. The New York Times author is not assuming that that's the only thing Biden said yesterday. If you're going to study any piece of literature, the way you study a piece of literature is by seeing what it says. You don't study the piece of literature by hypothesizing what it could have said. And so he's confusing things. I'm not talking about the historical Jesus. I'm not talking about what happened at Jesus' trial when I'm talking about Mark. I'm talking about Mark, what Mark's portrayal is. And it's important, if you want to know how Mark is trying to portray Jesus, then you need to see what Mark says and not pretend he says something else. Oh, yeah, I don't get that.
Yeah, this is absolutely what Christians do. And gang, let's not confuse ourselves as to why they do this. They need the fucking mega gospel and they want the mega gospel, right? And so you have to understand that it's up to them to show us that this story is coherent, and it's not, right? And I also find it incredibly insulting, by the way, that this is what Bart Ehrman does for a living. And the audacity to act like somehow he doesn't get what Mark is saying. We're going to set it aside for now, but I find that to be a low blow. The other thing is, Ehrman is making this case. This is the point of his argument, is that they're separate gospels. So you can't all of a sudden now, without evidence, just assume that you can make this the meta gospel coherent. And that's exactly what Winger's trying to do. And let's be clear about how he's trying to do it. Step number one is you give people the very, very pathetic apologetic that, oh, just because other things Jesus may or may not have said aren't recorded in the gospel, that doesn't mean he didn't say or do them. And then specifically, they want to force us to leave that door open so that they can then go in and say, oh, well, we can actually assume if we can pick out details from Luke, Matthew, or John, right, that we're within reason to then assume that they truly belonged in Mark's gospel, even though Mark didn't mention them. And that's a no-go. That's a no-go. Bart Ehrman's entire point is that, because I don't want to jump his point, because I haven't even seen this, right? But I have heard Bart Ehrman make this point repeatedly. He's arguing about how Mark is independent and different of the other gospels. So to do that, he's sticking within the frame of reference of Mark. And he's highlighting, what did Mark tell us? Because we only have what Mark told us to indicate what the fuck Mark told us. So this really bugs me. And I think it bugs me even more than may seem obvious at the surface level, because I think it's just incredibly lazy for Christians to just open this door, right? Because we're not even going to be sitting here talking about the Gospel of Mark versus the other Gospels, or one of the other Gospels in particular. We're actually going to be talking about the Gospel of Mike Winger. Because every single time Christians do that, they are going to start filling in the blanks, usually with shit that isn't even recorded in any of the Gospels. But if not, they're going to certainly do it by introducing accepted portions of the narrative, and you really can't do that. It's also problematic because Mark's gospel was first. And I'm not comfortable assuming any of the details of later gospels belong in the first gospel, right? So there's a temporal issue there too. But yeah, let's go ahead and get into it.
I get it. I certainly get it, but I think it's a little bit weird.
Here's the problem. If you read Mark carefully, you find that, and this is consistent with Luke as well, Jesus isn't being portrayed as saying nothing at all. He's being portrayed as saying nothing in his defense in a criminal case. There's a difference between being utterly silent and not giving a defense. That's how Mark presents Jesus.
Yes, I think it probably is that. And it's interesting, actually, because Pilate asked Jesus, "Are you the king of the Jews?" And this is an extremely interesting passage. And, you know, you ruin so much of it when you just try to figure out, well, what really happened. I'm really interested in what really happened. But if you want to understand Mark, what is Mark doing here? Pilate says, "Are you the king of the Jews?" And Jesus says, "You say so." So as I said in Greek, it's sou leges. And it's completely ambiguous. Does he mean yes? Does he mean no? Does he mean maybe? Does he mean those are your words, not mine? Why doesn't he give a direct answer? Okay, it's a very, very good question. And that's where interpretation comes in. You blow the question out of the water if you say, well, he said a lot of other things too. And so actually what he said was, and you come up with then you miss the point that Mark is trying to make a point about Jesus saying just that. And you have to put it in the context then of what happens for the next verses in chapter to figure out what Mark's trying to tell you. If you don't figure out what Mark's trying to tell you, you might as well read Matthew. Don't read Mark. Just read something else.
Exactly.
Jesus gets it. He's the only one who does. It's everybody else that doesn't get it.
All right, gang. And this is the one part of this I saw when I was preparing this clip for you guys. Or ooh, did I skip ahead again? I always do that. Like I always like hit the thing wrong with my finger, and it causes hella problems. But don't worry, we'll find our place. All right, so check it, y'all. I realize this about Jesus. Jesus is a fucking misleading asshole. The answer is fucking no. And why don't we ever talk about that? The answer when Jesus was asked, "Are you the king of the Jews?" was no. No. No, I am not the king of the Jews. I am so sick of Christians acting like every single thing that came out of this character's mouth was somehow wise. But honestly, it's just... it's the type of thing that just reveals that there was no real, direct, honest communication really recorded in the Gospels of Jesus saying exactly who he is, which is why I think all these stories are bullshit. Imagine your life being on the line because there are some motherfuckers wandering around following you, proclaiming that you are definitely the president of the United States of America. And the government's like, look, check it. Yeah, claiming to be the leader of the free world, claiming to be the commander-in-chief. Yeah, it turns out that's a threat to our democracy, so we don't tolerate that shit. It's called fucking treason. And so they sit your monkey ass down there in the goddamn interrogation. And then maybe they just round up a whole bunch of us because fucking Lupin or some shit called the FBI and said there's a whole delusional cult of atheists running around claiming to be the president of the United States. And I think it's really dangerous because I think they're going to start a fucking war soon. So they sit your monkey ass down and they're like, Caterpillar, are you the president of the United States of America? What the fuck is Caterpillar going to say? Motherfucker, I live in Australia. I don't know what you're talking about. No, I am not the president of the United States of America. You two punk, how about you? Are you the president of the United States of America? What the fuck is you two punk going to say? No, absolutely not. I don't know who told you that. Nope. I was not elected president. I was not chosen to be president. Matter of fact, I could not even tell you how to get from here to the White House. How about Cameron Bennett? Cameron Bennett, are you the president of the United States? No, I am not the president. What about you, Most High Apostle? Absolutely fucking not. I am not the president of the United States of America. And what the fuck does the most infinitely wise Jesus supposed to be saying? Oh, well, you say so. Nigga, what kind of answer is that? He never says what needs to be said. Always a parable, always a motherfucking weird-ass story, always a cloak and dagger response. Why do we settle for that shit? Why? Because the authors of the Bible had to have it that way, so let's not give it to them. I got a fucking news flash for you. Jesus Titty Christ was not the king of the Jews. He wasn't born the king of the Jews. He wasn't nominated king of the Jews. He wasn't elected king of the Jews. He did not ascend to the role of king of the Jews. The answer to the motherfucking question was no. And we wouldn't even be here if they recorded that story. So these motherfuckers who are sitting around trying to make up this bullshit ass story that explains how somebody who was definitely not the Messiah, definitely not descended from the house of David, definitely not a conqueror, definitely did not command an army. As best we could tell, he may have had like 10 or 12 motherfuckers following around. His motherfucking general was fucking Peter. Are you fucking serious? He was not the king. Christians, are you listening to me? He was not the king of the Jews. And what a fucking misleading asshole. And you know this story is bullshit, folks. Because again, declaring himself the king of the Jews would have made himself a fucking threat. Would have made himself an insurrectionist. It would have made him a fucking rebellious ass motherfucker. And he would have been well aware of that. Again, the problem here is that Mike Wingert is pissed about Bart Ehrman setting the record straight about what's in the Gospels, because he feels that will mislead people about the truth of Jesus. Motherfucker, the truth of Jesus is the motherfucking misleading motherfucker that started this shit to begin with. If Jesus wasn't some kind of asshole in this fucking story, because I don't believe the story is fucking true at all. Jesus, you've been brought here by the claim that people are following you, claiming that you're the king of the Jews. Are you, in fact, the king of the Jews? No. Let me swear on the Torah right here. Let me set the record straight, put my right hand on the Torah. I swear to tell the truth, the Jewish truth, and nothing but the Jewish truth, so help me, Jewish God, right? He'd be like, no, I am not the king of the Jews. I'm also not the Messiah. Everybody, are we good to go here? Yes, case dismissed. Interesting.
Said. And so he's confusing things. I'm not talking about the historical Jesus. I'm not talking about what happened at Jesus' trial when I'm talking about Mark. I'm talking about Mark, what Mark's portrayal is. And it's important, if you want to know how Mark is trying to portray Jesus, then you need to see what Mark says and not pretend he says something else.
Hey, Neil, appreciate you. Good to see you.
I get that. I get it. I certainly get it, but I think it's a little bit weird.
Here's the problem. If you read Mark carefully, you find
Maya,
that,
Cameron,
and this is consistent with Luke
Crystal,
as well,
Rodent,
Jesus isn't being portrayed as saying nothing at all. He's being portrayed as saying nothing in his defense in a criminal case.
You see love,
There's
Lena.
a difference between being utterly silent and not giving a defense.
Look at
That's
the
how Mark
trees, man.
presents
I
Jesus.
appreciate y'all all being here.
It probably is that. And it's interesting, actually, because Pilate asked Jesus, are you the king of the Jews? And this is an extremely interesting passage. And, you know, you ruin so much of it when you just try to figure out, well, what really happened. I'm really interested in what really happened. But if you want to understand Mark, what is Mark doing here? Pilate says, are you the king of the Jews?
No.
And Jesus says, you say so. So as I said in Greek, it's sou leges. And it's completely ambiguous. Does he mean yes? Does he mean no? Does he mean maybe? Does he mean those are your words, not mine? Why doesn't he give a direct answer? Okay, it's a very, very good question. And that's where interpretation comes in. You blow the question out of the water if you say, well, he said a lot of other things too. And so actually what he said was, and you come up with then you miss the point. that
He doesn't give a straight answer because this is a fucking bullshit-ass fantasy movie script. We're just dealing in a time before movies. No real person would have been dumb enough to not answer this question. And this is part of the problem, too, even with Bart Ehrman. Because Bart Ehrman, you got to at some point hit me, brother, and tell me that this is not a historical story. Yes, I get that it is all well and good to tear apart the what's going on and make sure that we section out Mark, but part of what would reinforce Dr. Ehrman's point is to acknowledge that these are all stories about an event that probably didn't take place. And if it did, these particular tellings of that event are certainly not historically accurate. I'm also not exactly sure what a procurator does from day to day, but as I understand it, it's very similar to being a prosecutor. Right? You after people are arrested and they're charged, it's kind of your job to lead them through the trial and all of that type of bullshit. No procurator ever in the history of the Roman Empire would have got to that level of procurator or been able to collect a motherfucking single salary payment if they were not thorough enough to get a straight answer out of a motherfucker before you hang them on a cross because somebody claimed they were running around saying they were king of the Jews. So I find it wholly unbelievable that Jesus would not have answered this question directly in one way or the other, folks. If you are the fucking God Almighty and you know that shit and you're about to die, be resurrected, and you're like, yes, I'm the king of the Jews. Yeah, I know I wasn't elected king of the Jews, but look, let me tell you the truth. Truth is, bro, I'm God. So go ahead. I know y'all are going to say this is treason and you're going to have to kill me, but I promise you this. Come check on me 3 days later and I will be about that bitch. All right, go on and do what you got to do. Or if you're like most of us, you're like, nope, definitely not the king of the Jews. Sorry about the misunderstanding. And this is where we get ourselves into liar, lunatic, or Lord territory. And Jesus definitely isn't Lord. Liar and lunatic are both very much still on the fucking table. But what I really think, folks, is that let's just assume a lot of the historical bullshit for the sake of fucking argument, right? So if Jesus was real, if Jesus was tried, if Jesus was crucified, right? Let's just assume all that was true. All that's true. Jesus was real. Jesus got himself into some shit. Jesus was crucified. Jesus died as a result of said crucifixion. None of these details about his trial are legit. There is no guy. I am telling you, it is an insult to my intelligence, and I am not a prosecutor. I am merely someone who's worked as an intern in a prosecutor's office. But part of that motherfucking job was sitting my narrow ass in criminal court pretty much every goddamn day, resolving case after case after case. Literally, we will walk into the room every day with standing room only. Like, think about a church. Every seat is filled, and there are people all along this wall, all along that wall, all along that wall, and double lined up on the hallway route. When you walk into a prosecutor's office in criminal court in Newark, New Jersey, you literally feel like a motherfucking professional wrestler making a goddamn entrance, because you can literally just slap hands with people on both sides. Do-do-do-do, hit my music. Do-do-do-do-do. That's how busy the fucking courtroom is. And every day, you just clear all them goddamn cases. What is the point I'm telling you? Prosecutors do prosecuting all day, every day. There is not a chance in hell this shit went down like this. There's 0% chance Pontius Pilate was like, yeah, I haven't really, nobody's turned over any evidence. Yeah, we really can't find anything to warrant the prosecution of this Jesus guy. So, yeah, I don't find any fault with him. Oh, what? Say what? Oh, a bunch of angry rabbis said he's running around claiming to be king of the Jews. Right. And me, as the Roman procurator, I care so much about one little motherfucker running around claiming to be king of the Jews, although on my way into court, just like a modern day prosecutor, he was like, there's a fake Messiah, and there's a fake Messiah. Oh, and that fake Messiah over there I went to school with, hey buddy, how you doing? And there's a fake Messiah, and there's a fake Messiah, and there's a fake Messiah. But he's got his nuts all tangled in a bunch over fucking Jesus titty fucking Christ. Not a chance. Not a chance. And then on top of that, he goes to do his fucking interrogation, and that's the best he's got. Also, motherfuckers, can we clarify another glaring error in this whole motherfucking story that I literally just noticed? Think about this conversation that we're all retelling. Pontius motherfucking Pilate looks Jesus square in his motherfucking face and says, so you're the king of the Jews. Jesus looks back at Pontius Pilate, who, as far as we know, is not Jewish, doesn't follow Jesus, and is literally probably never heard of this person before they become prosecuted. And Jesus looks at him and says, you say so. Christians, I am telling you, this story is fucking made up, because there's no way in fucking hell Pontius Pilate is not like, no, I've never said so. Pontius Pilate would make it very fucking clear to Jesus titty fucking Christ, we're not here because Pontius Pilate came up with the idea that Jesus is the fucking king of the Jews. There's no way he looked Pontius Pilate in his face and said, oh, you say so. And then Pontius Pilate was like, you're right. This is all my fault. Sorry. Maybe gaslighting wasn't a thing. So Pontius Pilate was just too new to the dance, too new to the game to figure out that Jesus had just flipped the script on him. But trust me, man, this is the most unrealistic fucking story ever.
Mark is trying to make a point about Jesus saying just that. And you have to put it in the context then of what happens for the next verses in chapter to figure out what Mark's trying to tell you. If you don't figure out what Mark's trying to tell you, you might as well read Matthew. Don't read Mark. Just read something else.
Jesus gets it. He's the only one who does. It's everybody else that doesn't get it. Bart Ehrman puts that attitude on Jesus and ignores so much of what is actually in the gospel. That conclusion, I hope I've demonstrated for Mark, is utterly fallacious. Like, this is super wrong. Dr. Ehrman has projected the attitude of Peter in Mark's gospel onto Jesus in Mark's gospel. Peter is the one who doesn't know what's going on. Peter's the one who wouldn't believe that the cross was going to happen and didn't believe that it had a purpose when it started to happen. That's Peter. Peter later changes his mind, later becomes a whole different perspective. But during that time, Peter's the guy that doesn't get it. Peter's the guy that's confused. Peter's the guy who is in despair and shock. Jesus is not.
What Mike is referring to is when you read through Mark's gospel, Jesus regularly says that he's going to be executed and raised from the dead. There are 3 passages that are called passion predictions where he predicts
Logan,
that's going to happen.
glad
Jesus in Mark 9:31 predicts his
suspicious.
betrayal, his death, and his resurrection. Mark 14:24, again in Mark 10:45.
And so you pretty well know that Jesus knows this is going to happen to him. But what the interesting thing that I do point out that I think is what he's objecting to is that when it comes to the moment, Jesus seems to be in doubt.
You get the idea of Jesus being in shock at what's happening to him.
And I think Mike is saying, look, it doesn't make any sense because he knows all the way through. So, of course, he's not in doubt at the end. That's his objection to me. That could be a valid point. But you need to read what Mark says. So Jesus gets put on trial with Pontius Pilate. Are you the king of the Jews? You say so. That's all he says. He goes out to the place of crucifixion. He doesn't say anything to anyone. He gets nailed to the cross, doesn't say anything to anyone. He's all hanging on the cross, doesn't say anything at all. In the other Gospels, he says things, but in Mark, he doesn't say anything until the very end. The only thing he does, only thing he says is, my God, why have you forsaken me? So his disciples have all abandoned him. One of them has denied him. One of them has betrayed him. Everybody walking by him is mocking him. Both robbers are mocking him. And at the very end, he says, my God, why have you forsaken me? And he dies. And so Mike Winger will want to say, well, yes, he didn't really mean that.
I think there's a better theory. Jesus is thinking of the entire psalm, right? Verse 1 included, I'm being forsaken, but he's also thinking of the entire psalm, Psalm 22, which includes detailed descriptions of the cross, right? Specific events, as well as his death, as well as his future hope, as well as the gospel going out to the world and people getting saved, all of the above.
What he meant was,
I'm sorry, gang, but Christianity doesn't make any sense. What? I don't even know how to put this into words, but when Christians just do this thing, you guys really need to demonstrate that there's a God. You have not demonstrated this to us. So none of this shit makes any sense. And I don't think you guys hear how remedial you sound. That's going to be the new R word, remedial. Right? Like y'all have to be put on a different educational tract because you're not with the rest of us. You're not following along with the progression of the courses. I know we should be focusing on the details of people's arguments and all of this type of stuff, but I just want to pause and just say, like, it's important that we stop letting people just say stuff like this, because it does feel crazy to me. Like, oh no. I think what was happening is he was thinking of the entire psalm, and he was just playing it out. Right? Dude, you're weird. That whole just divine, no, he was playing into the divine Jewish magic of centuries before him. Dude, that just sounds fucking bonkers to me. It just sounds fucking bonkers. I'm sorry. But can we just focus on a really important point here, which is, I told you so. I fucking told you so. I fucking told you so. I told you we were gonna open that door. We were gonna open the door to what? I didn't even watch this beforehand, but I'm telling you, I told you we were gonna open that door to, just because it isn't recorded doesn't mean it wasn't said, or doesn't mean it wasn't going on in Jesus's headspace. And now, not only is Mike Winger going to use the other gospels to fill in the blank, he's going to do what? He's going to give us the gospel of Mike Winger. As though when that shit was recorded right here, they wrote that shit down and they were like, yes. And then Pontius Pilate said unto him, are you the king of the Jews? It's funny, I opened right to the Psalms. And Jesus said, so you say. But in reality, he was remembering the Psalms and how he was to manifest the words of the holy psalmist. He knew in this moment, as he was being questioned by Pontius Pilate, that now was the time for him to enact his divine plan according to the word of the Psalms. Right? Right? That's how he did it. He literally threw that shit in there just like it was in the gospel. Like that was an extra fucking detail that just got kind of just inconveniently left out of the earliest manuscripts. But if we really had the gospel of Mark that we should have, it would have read just like that. Right? Like, I told you it was going to all be about opening up the door to the fucking gospel according to Mike Winger.
That he's quoting one of the Psalms, and at the end of the Psalm, after the person starts by saying, why have you forsaken me? At the end of the psalmist thanks God for being on his side, And so Jesus doesn't mean what he says. He meant what was going to be at the end of the psalm instead of the part he quoted.
So if Psalm 22 is what Jesus is referring to, then it not only includes his death, it includes hope and resurrection and future and salvation going to the world. Okay, all of that's included in this cry. But Bart Ehrman doesn't want you to think that.
Okay, so yeah, that's what people say. And it's a complete misreading of Mark. Because if Mark wanted you to think that Jesus felt God was on his side, he would have quoted the end of the psalm.
There you go.
He's asking God why he has forsaken him, and he dies in despair. The only reason to think he didn't die in despair is because you're reading the other Gospels instead of Mark, and because you have your personal beliefs about the matter. But read Mark, and Mark doesn't have that view. And if you don't see that, boy, do you miss the point. Because right after Jesus says that, why have you forsaken me? And he dies not knowing. The reader knows. Because the very next thing is the curtain in the temple rips in half. This is the curtain that separates the Holy of Holies where God dwells from the rest of the temple. Now God is not separated from anybody else the way he had been. Now he's available to everybody because of Jesus' death. And the very next thing that happens in the next breath is the centurion sees how Jesus dies, and he says, truly, this man was the Son of God. In other words, Jesus' death gives you access to God because it's the death of the Messiah, the Son of God. And that's Mark's point. So that even though Jesus dies not knowing what's going on, the reader absolutely knows. And he sees, yep, okay, that's it. That's why he had to die.
Because Mark is definitely thinking of the whole psalm. Let me prove it to you. Okay, Psalm 22:18. This verse might sound familiar.
Also, gang, I just want to quickly touch out here that we always talk about these minimal facts with regard to resurrection and all of this fucking bullshit, but we don't talk about these accompanying miracles, right? So y'all know it's all bullshit. And if you don't know it's all bullshit, let me It's a ranting kind of day, gang. But in case you didn't understand, let me remind you why all of this shit is bullshit. Number one, your monkey ass evolved. Now, what does that mean, folks? Well, it means that there is no Garden of Eden story. It means that there is no creationism. Ergo, there is no fucking such thing as a curse on the world called sin. Ergo, Jesus Titty Christ had really no reason to become resurrected because God never created us. There is no sin. And so what would the fucking sacrifice and resurrection be for to begin with? Nothing. So if, if the New Testament doesn't hold up right out the gate with Genesis, man, we could just chuck this whole thing out and move on with our business. But y'all know so many Christians are so easily dismissive of the Old Testament and dismissive even of creation and blah, 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 but not that fucking gospel. Oh, they know that fucking gospel's real. Oh, they know that fucking gospel is on point, right? And the authenticity of the gospel, to me, taken as a whole, we got to recognize all those other miracles are in there too. And I just don't see them talked about, right? Like, why doesn't anybody ever talk about, like, the tearing of the veil and all the other signs and wonders allegedly that accompanied Jesus' death? I think we should talk about them more because they remind me of the foolishness of, like, the Muhammad splitting the moon type story. And I think they're particularly useful as we're thinking out loud. We're going through this together, gang, and we'll all learn. We're all learning as we go. But I think it's particularly useful because they're in the gospel, right? And so I think if we can find things that help believers actually see that you could toss out all of that other shit, but even in your gospels where you have the very story of Jesus' death and resurrection, we have some seriously unsubstantiated claims and no sort of external veracity of these claims. Do y'all really think the day the temple magically tore open when Jesus fucking titty Christ died wouldn't be recorded in Jewish and secular history? This is what I'm talking about. Yes, it's important to help people see that Noah's Ark didn't happen and Adam and Eve is sitting on some bullshit. But putting a little pebble in their shoe about some of these minor miracles, we may call them, auxiliary miracles, we may call them, I think that's also going to do some work. I really do. Y'all know me, burn it all down, and by all of it, I do mean
If you read
all of
Mark's
it.
gospel, they divided my garments among them, and for my clothing they cast lots. This is one of the many verses Mark alludes to. This is in Mark 15:24. They crucified and divided his garments among themselves, casting lots for them. You see, Mark is actually alluding to Psalm 22, verse 18, not just verse 1, in his account of Jesus in Mark 15.
No, I think what's happening is that Mark, like other people at his time, around about 40 years after Jesus' death, had found passages in Scripture that they used to show that Jesus is fulfilling what was predicted in the Scriptures. And so the fact he's crucified by two criminals on either side of him, and the fact that he's buried by a rich man, there are all of these allusions to biblical passages and, Isaiah 53. And so when Christians centered in on those things, they started seeing that you could tell the story of Jesus in a way that showed that it's like what was being said in the Psalms or in Isaiah. And so they weren't thinking about these texts the way we think of them. If we think about Psalm 22, for example, or Isaiah 53, we have ways that we interpret these texts as wholes. We think of them as having integrity as a whole text. And so Psalm 22 is its own unit. And so we think of the whole unit as being one thing. Isaiah 53 is part of 2nd Isaiah from chapters 40 to 55. And so scholars interpret that as a unit. But the early Christians weren't doing it that way. And neither were the rabbis, by the way. The rabbis typically would take a verse here and a verse there and show how they're related to each other in ways that we might not even think about, but they'd be disparate all over the place. And so the literary unity that we think about isn't normally how people
Sorry, I forgot to switch the views.
And so the fact that he quotes Psalm 22 in a couple of different ways, several different ways, and alludes to it, or Isaiah 53 or whatever, it doesn't mean that he's reading it from beginning to end thinking that the whole thing applies.
Again, Bart Ehrman is claiming that Mark's intention is that you only think of verse 1 in Psalm 22. But did you know that it was normal rabbinical teaching practice to refer to a passage of Scripture with the title or the first verse of that Scripture? So the reason for this is that back in the day, they didn't have chapters and verses. So no Jew in the first century ever said the phrase Psalm 22. This is not saying that because they don't use those terms. They would refer to the psalm, the my God, why have you forsaken me psalm. And rabbis would refer to the first part of a passage, the first verse or the first phrase in a passage, as a way of getting their students to think of the whole passage. That was normal teaching habits. We even see it in the Talmud. They do this. They quote the first phrase to refer to the whole passage.
Let's put it this way. Today, we have literary theorists. Say, 20 years ago, we had deconstructionists who were literary critics who had various ways of interpreting literature. That would say that was happening in the 1980s. Would you say that a tradition of literary theory in the 1980s was relevant in the 1730s? So the rabbinic tradition is much later than the New Testament. And so it doesn't work to say, well, rabbis say this on the assumption, well, it's all a long time ago. It's all the same thing.
Right.
But, literary theory today isn't the same as it was in the early 18th century. And rabbinic theories of interpretation varied over time. And so whatever you say about Mark quoting a rabbi living hundreds of years later, the Talmud, I'm not sure which part of the rabbinic, he probably hasn't read any of the rabbinic literature himself, but the Mishnah was codified around the year 2.
Also, apologists, Christians, y'all need to go fuck yourselves. Can I just also put a little point of emphasis on this here? Bart Ehrman is trying to do the scholarly thing, and he is making a really good point about assuming that things worked earlier as they did later. But fuck your God. Seriously, fuck your God. Why didn't anybody tell me? Why is it that sitting there in the pews of my grandfather's church growing up, or sitting in my church, my non-denominational church every fucking Sunday, or all those hours I spent praying to God in sincere devotion, all my grandfather went to school for his little doctorate in theology and all this. Why doesn't anybody know this? Why didn't God care enough about me to be clear to me about what's going on? Why couldn't he make his message so abundantly clear that I understood it? Why is it that I need PhDs to explain to me what was truly going on? Then I have to study the history so that I can understand how rabbis throughout time would have interpreted this passage, all so that a message could be delivered unto Christians who are not Jewish rabbis. I think it's a problem to ignore these type of elephant in the room type situations, because the Christians like Mike Winger are really not arguing for the nuances of what you might call literary construction. Mike Winger does not go to church on Sunday morning, pull his pastor aside and say, I love that sermon you gave this morning. Isn't it so wonderful that the gospel writers were the learned men that they were, and that they knew and understand the literary customs of the rabbinical order of the time, and that they constructed this? No. He is going to throw his hands up and worship and praise. He is going to be praising Jesus and amening and hallelujahing what? A divine God who miraculously sent his inspiring word to all of us, right? And so he's trying to sidestep that. And yeah, it's really important to do what you're doing if you're Bart Ehrman, but y'all, like, it drives me crazy that they're so clearly allowed to defend themselves within the realms of naturalism, right? Well, these authors were, restrained by their backgrounds and the cultural milieu of the time. It was ordinary for men of this type who were in the... What happened to magical, inspired word of God? Right? They want to argue for an inspired doctrine on Sunday, but through the means of completely mundane natural history, Monday through Saturday. No. Come argue for that miraculous shit. Tell us why God didn't miraculously solve this problem. Why couldn't he use exactly... It's so funny. Like, every time you go through one of these conversations about interpretations and hermeneutics and all of this type of bullshit, right? They all sit there and be like, well, you got to remember, in the original Aramaic, it would have said this, and then translated into Greek, it means da-da-da-da-da, right? But there's always a list of options in these situations, right? Well, there are, 4 different terms that you could use for girl, and they chose this one, but then actually there are 3 to 4 different meanings depending on the time and era of that word. Well, then why didn't God just pick exactly the right one, right? They go back and pick, they say, right, think about it. They're saying this word is ambiguous. It could mean any of these 4 other words. Why didn't God just use the right alternate every time? Every single time the apologist is able to divine the mind of God such that they can pick among the menu of options the correct interpretation every single time. But God himself could not get it right the first time. Pathetic.
200. And the Talmud, which is where most of the rabbinic stuff comes from, that's 5th century. I mean, so, yeah.
It's about what Mark is saying about Jesus, what Luke is saying about Jesus, and how they're very different. And the obvious implication is that they are irreconcilably contradictory. How would this impact you if you were the student and he's your professor in college? He's like the smartest guy you've ever met, right? And you're sitting there and he says all this, and you're sitting there thinking, man, I mean, I don't know. I guess maybe he's right. Like, oh gosh, oh no. Maybe you listen and you go, yes, I knew it. I knew that the Gospels were all contradictory and nonsense.
I thought that the Gospels each had a distinctive point when I was an evangelical Christian. And it wasn't because I wanted to point out contradictions. It's because I thought that there were 4 Gospels in the New Testament and not one Gospel. And each of these is a book written by a particular author. Even if you believe that God inspired each author, he inspired 4 different authors, and presumably that's because they have 4 different things to say. And if you pretend that they all mean the same thing, then you don't have any explanation for why there are 4 of them. Just write one of them.
Now, this is really key here, gang, because this is like, oh, man, I almost want to say this is the Bart Ehrman argument. I hate to say it, but humans are pieces of shit, and we will boil down your entire fucking existence to like your most memorable highlights. It's shitty. It's kind of fucked up to think about it, right? But, you know, we just, that's how it is. If you're fortunate enough to be remembered, we ain't gonna remember a whole lot of shit about you. But look, y'all, Bart Ehrman really did help me see clearly this point of there are 4 gospels, and you know, we'll get into some other time about, you know, the sort of historical social significance of that. sorry, I hit the wrong button. Like there are 4 different narratives, right? And they played out differently. They emerge from different communities at different times. They speak to different issues. They serve different needs. But what I really want to focus on is when Bart Ehrman presents this, he is not presenting this as an atheist argument. I think it undermines the Christian narrative, which to me infers a certain coherence to the gospel narratives that isn't there. But that wouldn't necessarily be the route I go, right? Because we don't, you know, it's just not our strongest argument. What he's really doing here is just like being historically accurate. And I just want to be clear that this is not a Christian versus atheist thing. And I think this is one of those examples of you see the atheist in front of you, but you don't see the Christian it took to get here. And so I really think we should take Bart Ehrman seriously when he says that, like, this isn't an interpretation that relies that he had when he was still a believer. You know, I had very weird interpretations of the gospel when I was a believer. I'm not sure that I saw them in isolation, but I certainly I thought that they emphasized different aspects of the Jesus story. I did think that, like, you know, they're trying to focus on different aspects of his life, different aspects of his message, a different telling of his birth or death, if, you know, those are included. You know, like, so I really think that he's being genuine there. And it strikes me as, again, these are one of those issues where it's really interesting because I've seen Bart Ehrman give that talk in both settings. Talking to a room of skeptics, also talking to rooms of Christians, and I a lot of times I see Christians as being maybe a bigger part of his audience and you know, his target audience, I should say. And when he gives this type of message to Christians, he's not like trying to discourage them in their faith. He's just trying to put them on game. And a lot of you guys even probably even seen Bart Ehrman do his other thing where he does like the parallel readings. Like he talks about reading the Gospels in parallel instead of one after the other, so you can see that that they're not aligned. Even the literary motifs that they're starting to create are different, right? And that's why we get differences. So, for instance, with the timing of Jesus's death in relationship to Passover. So yeah, I think all this is legit, and I just think this is one of those things that really gets at the issue here. It really highlights all of the ambiguity, I think, in the way people feel about Bart Ehrman. Christians that see him as a threat to the traditional understanding are like ringing the 4-alarm fire, like trying to get this man's books burned, like, do not read Bart Ehrman, whatever you do. At the same time, Christians who are just trying to, kind of get clued in, kind of learn, like they often find Bart Ehrman very reassuring because he's not trying to tear down their faith. He just helps them get a more fuller understanding of the uniqueness of each gospel, because that's normally how he puts it. He's like, oh, you got to understand what this guy's doing theologically, what this guy's telling you theologically, what that guy's telling you theologically. And so Christians walk out of there being like, oh, this is so beautiful. I have that much more enriched of an understanding. He teaches in the Bible Belt. He teaches primarily to Christians. So he kind of goes about this a lot of the way I go about evolution. Like, and not everybody in this community likes the way I go about evolution, but some of y'all that have seen me in debates and stuff know that when I go into evolutionary biologist mode as opposed to atheist mode, I try not to conflate the two, and I don't use evolution to defend atheism. I see how that could be done, right? But it isn't strictly applicable, you know what I mean? So he does that a lot, and that's part of why I'm that way too, right? I have a classroom full of students. We could talk about creationism if that's the subject of the class, or we could talk about human evolution if that's the subject of the class, but a lot of times it's not. And so you're presenting evolution, the science and the theory itself, in a way that's neutral to your perspective on God, right? That's just not, evolution is a natural theory. I think understanding that natural theory will inform your view of theological questions, and I see that time and time again. That's part of the argument I'm trying to articulate in some of my postdoctoral work, and maybe even a little bit in this grant, right? Like, I think there's a way in which evolution really does undermine traditional faith claims, and we don't talk about it. And since we don't talk about it, we don't recognize that we might be ignoring a risk, right? Like, the argument's pretty straightforward, so let me help articulate, and then we'll see if I could put this motherfucker on paper, y'all. But basically, if it is true that evolution, in fact, undermines people's confidence in traditional creation narratives, then we can say it will confidently, right, that it will tend to undermine people's belief systems based on those creation narratives and creator type gods. Now, while a lot of people who practice the sort of majority religions that we're dealing with, aka the Abrahamic faiths, right, they'll find a way to say, oh, my Islam, my Christianity, my Judaism can accommodate evolution. A lot of people can't, and that means there's a risk there that they can become alienated from the traditional community that they're associated with, like if they grew up in one of those faiths. And even if they did not, right, this understanding can significantly reduce the probability that they do, right? So if you are just, let's say, a secular person wandering through life for whatever reason, you've never been religiously affiliated, maybe didn't grow up in a religious home, you just learned about evolution in college, right? Now you're 25, kind of getting a little discontent with the bar scene or the club scene just because you're just growing up looking for different types of relationships, different things, right? A lot of people at that age and stage of life go, boop, where? To the church, right? You already know, though, I'm not going to be on the same plane with a lot of those people because of some of the beliefs they have, right? And so that means there's sort of a twofold risk. You might lose that community if it's something you have, but if you never had it even, there's now this extra risk that you won't be able to be associated with that. And so that kind of ties into the need for evolutionary biologists to be actually aware of that relationship and not to ignore it, not to just sort of take a scientific out and say, oh, nope, I'm not doing that, right? But with that being said, right, we have to teach it accurately as you know, the scientific theory that it is, and not you know, overstate our case or alienate our students by making it sound like there's something about evolutionary theory that teaches us that God doesn't exist. It's just not quite how it works. I just want to say, and I know I kind of went on a little bit about it, but I actually relate to Bart Ehrman on this tip. And I think Mike Winger is being a little bit I don't know what the word is, right? But I think he knows that his audience is going to be more likely to accept his rejection of Bart Ehrman's scholarship because he's framing it as don't stay away from this big bad boogeyman, Bart Ehrman, atheist scholar, because this atheist scholar, Bart Ehrman, is trying to take your faith. Just stay away from Bart Ehrman and his atheist scholarship, the atheist Bart Ehrman, right? And what I'm trying to point out to y'all is, just like I am with evolution, when Bart Ehrman really gets onto this tip and really gets on his shit, he presents to atheists and Christians just alike. And really nothing about what he's saying is anti-Christian. He is just saying this is the truth about the fucking Bible. This is what scholars know and don't know. This is the proper way to, now that we understand based on the historicity of these stories and what's actually in the text and the corresponding evidence and the traditions and blah, 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 we figured out, bro, there was never a meeting of the minds where they all sat down and said, we are going to write 4 different chapters called Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John in that order, and we're going to create a consistent, coherent narrative between them 4 motherfuckers. That just isn't what happened here. And so, yeah, you could say fuckface evolutionary biologist, atheist Jay Bundy is trying to mislead you about creation. But I'd at the end of the day be like, yes, I'm an atheist. And if you want to talk about how evolution factors or doesn't factor into my atheism, I'd be happy to have that conversation with you. But there's nothing in my argument and in the way I teach and present evolution that necessarily says there can't be a God. And it's pernicious when people do that, because one side is taking the proper precautions, right? Bart Ehrman, atheist, as far as I know, Bart Ehrman says he's an atheist. So even though Bart Ehrman don't be flying that atheist flag and super kicking people in the face on behalf of atheism the way I'd always like him to, I'm going to go ahead and assume the man's sincere in his atheism. And to me, as a scholar, totally different field, but nevertheless academic, I can appreciate that he feels he has to have the proper restraint. He has to say, I might be an atheist, but what I am presenting has nothing to do with that. And so he's letting it, he's compartmentalizing them purposely. Fuckface Mike Winger is making it sound as though Bart Ehrman is making the case he makes because he is an atheist. And that is so misleading. Because it's just not true. And not only is it, you know, kind of pissing me off because it's a shot at Bart that's not fair, he's totally misleading his audience because Bart Ehrman's, he's lying about how anti-Christian, y'all got me, let's go.
And of course, throughout the history of Christianity, that's been the view. And even in the second Christian century,
what's up, Slug? What's up, Gur? What's up, Stephanie?
Diatessaron, which was diatessaron means through the four. And what he did is he took the four gospels and he combined them into one big gospel. And so you take verses from Mark, Matthew, Luke, John, and they put them all together so that the same story would be longer because it'd have everything in it. But there weren't contradictions now because it was all there. And that was the gospel used in Syria for centuries. Rather than the four individual gospels, they used the diatessaron. And scholars today say, well, yeah, no, that's an interesting enterprise. But when you do that, you're not really trying to understand what Matthew, for example, is trying to teach or seeing how it's different from John. The result of seeing them as different is it's true. You do find contradictions there. But that's not the reason for doing it. The reason for doing it is because you want to see what an author says. When I read Charles Dickens, I just don't assume he's saying the same thing as George Eliot. Or that Mark Twain is saying the same thing as T.S. Eliot. I mean, it's like you let each author.
Hey, Christians, you ready for this one? This one's going to be quick. Out of context. Yes, Christians. Oh, yes. Yes, Christians, when you read that sweet, sweet gospel of fuckface Jesus and you go through it and you're getting that joy, 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 joy down in your heart. Where? Down in your heart. Where? Down in your heart. Because you are reading those gospels and you are seeing the mercy and love of God as the single thread that ties them all together and makes them into one glorious story of God's redemption through Jesus fuckface Christ, who was born perfectly under the virgin, to a virgin, suffered under Pontius Pilate. All that shit. You are taking your own Bible out of context. I know. Just hang on. Moment of silence. Deserve that shit. How you like them apples? Yeah, bitch. Take that shit. I know it hurts. I know it's supposed to. Let it sting, motherfucker. Let it sting. Out of context.
Author have his own say. And if it turns out they contradict each other, that's worth noting. But that's not why you're doing it. You're doing it to see what an author has to say.
This is a place that is targeted by Bart Ehrman to mislead people, in my opinion. He may have turned more Christians into atheists than anybody else alive today. His content that's...
Forget it, just forget it. Forget it. It's over, forget it. I forgot to mute that shit. Forget every bad thing I have ever said about Dr. Bart Ehrman. Just can it. Just forget it. Just go back through the tape and delete all of it. Bart Ehrman and I may have our issues. We may have disagreements, but let's just call them academic disagreements amongst brethren. He is an atheist after all, right? You know? It makes him a brother from another mother to me. Plus, I don't think Bart Ehrman is a fuckface. I've never heard Bart Ehrman sitting on no right-wing bullshittery. I'd be interested to know. See, I'm all up in the man's business now. But way to go, Bart Ehrman, that nobody knows your political views. But I'd love to hear him because I'm curious. Where am I going with this, gang? If Bart Ehrman, first off, I think the easiest way to deconvert person is to just have him read the Bible. Done. All right. But if Bart Ehrman really is responsible for more people deconverting than any other single person, he deserves a Nobel Peace Prize. He deserves a Nobel Peace Prize right now. Fucking Charles or Larry or Curly or Mo, whoever the fuck is the king of England right now, that motherfucker needs to knight his ass. I knight you, fucking Sir Bart Ehrman. Okay? He needs to be let up in the AAAS. I don't care that he's not a scientist. He's made so many advancements on behalf of science, literally just by being a historian who deconverts people. There are not enough superlatives. And I got another one. You could just straight up jack Elon Musk. Just jack Elon, do the world 2 solids in 1 stroke. Just jack Elon Musk, take all his shit. And I mean all his shit, his companies, his businesses, his stock portfolios. Take everything that motherfucker got and just sign it on over to Bart D. Ehrman. If Bart D. Ehrman has actually deconverted, take all Elon Musk shit right now and just give it to Bart D. Ehrman. There are not enough fucking, give him a fucking Olympic gold. I literally don't care. What? I gotta meet Bart Ehrman. If that's true, I don't know that it's true, but if that shit is true, Bart Ehrman just shot way up onto my Mount fucking Rushmore of human beings.
Very persuasive, that is convincing lots of people to depart from the Christian faith. For the most part, he's radically distorting Mark. I mean, radically, horribly distorting Mark, ignoring Mark entirely, to construct a false contradiction here that is misleading and convincing to millions of people. Like obviously this is not Mark's emphasis. That's Ehrman's emphasis, not Mark. Okay, this has nothing to do with the gospel of Mark. This is all about misleading people about the word of God, sadly.
No, to think it is rather insulting to me. I do not attack Christianity at all. I don't ever try.
I just got to say, Bart Ehrman, I'm with you, bro. I'm with you on this one. It is utterly insulting the way Christians disrespect people's scholarship. And I don't care what your field is. I feel this way. I'm sure the historians feel this way. And look, it is part of my beef with Rebecca. A lot of times, folks, a conversation with me is a fucking trap. Because I might give you the opportunity to show me who you are. Yeah, and we might both later come to regret me giving you that fucking opportunity. So I have seen the bullshit with Rebecca Davis. She called into this show and sat here across the fucking table from, oh no, I'm going off about Rebecca on side cam. Yeah, we're not even going to do that. That's not about to happen. Nope, not about mute this shit. Adjust the lights. Bring up the lights. Bring up the fucking lights. That raggedy bitch Rebecca sat on my fucking channel across from me and told me, oh, well, I do feel bad. Because I told her, Rebecca, the shit you do on your channel, this young earth creation is nonsense. It is an insult to me and other scientists like myself personally. It is a personal insult. And for those of you that don't understand the dehumanization involved, let me break it on down for you. Oh, and don't get me wrong. These motherfuckers that are gaslighting you in your everyday conversations, they're fucking dehumanizing you, and they're disrespecting you to your face as well. But what I mean in particular is imagine yourself having a greenhouse that you built. You built this fucking greenhouse in the backyard, and you told your partner you use the motherfucking front door, or you go out the garage until I fucking tell you. Under no circumstances you're asked to use that fucking backyard and see what I got going back out there. So you built them a motherfucking greenhouse, and then you populated that shit with some grasses and some fucking shrubs and some fucking trees and flowers upon flowers upon flowers upon flowers upon flowers upon flowers upon flowers. Maybe even some flittering insects. A nice little fucking ecosystem so you can fucking keep everything running harmoniously, and the shit looks fucking great. Matter of fact, before you revealed it to your partner, you brought over the motherfucking newspaper and the fucking you know your partners read the fucking paper, and the fucking paper's all excited. This shit's fucking beautiful, and you've been showing all your friends on fucking Instagram, and this raggedy motherfucker, you finally bring him, and you go and you lead him by the, you put a fucking I don't know, fucking blindfold on his ass, and you fucking bring him outside, and you fucking walk him down or whatever, and you're so excited, you're so giddy, you're going to show him all your hard work, and you take the blindfold off of him, and you go, honey, so what do you think? What do you think of all of this that I built? And that motherfucker looks around. What greenhouse? I don't see a greenhouse. I don't see any flowers. I don't smell the roses you say are right over there. I'm not seeing the shadow cast by the shade of the tree that's been right over there growing this whole time. What the fuck was that thing that stung me? Wasn't just a mosquito that snuck into here. That's what they do to scientists. They don't care how hard we work, for how long, all of the restraints that we have to deal with and go through to do our work, to get our work accepted by our peers, to train, to teach, to maintain funding. In a fucking greenhouse, y'all, you have no idea it's not a greenhouse. It is literally mountain upon mountain upon mountain of evidence. And yes, I'm being metaphorical, but I'm also being literal. Literally, you can take open a mountain, an actual mountain, slice down the middle of that motherfucker like it's a goddamn birthday cake, and within the layers of that mountain, you will actually find fossils corresponding to the evolutionary and geologic record. And these motherfuckers look around going, mountains? What mountains? Oh, it says in his holy word he'd make the rocks cry out. I don't know what you're talking about. And I told her. And I told her that to her face on air. And that raggedy bitch went on her channel and said, oh, well, I feel so bad. I've had a serious conversation with Dr. J, and I was thinking about all of my scientist friends, and like Erica and Dr. Dave, and man, I've been really thinking about, I don't want these people to think I disrespect their work. I don't want these people to feel insulted. I'm going to have to think about how strongly I oppose evolution going here on out. I don't want these people to think I don't respect them. I do respect them and admire them. I've really got to think about this. Would you not know? Shortly thereafter, bitch stopped making content. No more Rebecca Davis, y'all. We had that joy, 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 joy down in our hearts. Where down in our hearts? Where down in our hearts? Boy, we was fucking kick lining like the Rockettes. The bitch is gone, choom. The bitch is gone, choom. Fuck that bitch, Rebecca. The bitch is gone, choom. I mean, high kicks and everything, y'all. Shit was epic. And then she comes back and says, what? That she's more committed to young earth creationism. She's more committed to being opposed to evolution than ever before. There's a reason I want to fight these people. I do not tolerate disrespecting my work, the work of my peers, the work of my colleagues, the work of my students, the work of my mentors, and the entire fucking record of the human endeavor that we have fought so hard to gain the current understanding of the world around us that we have. And these motherfuckers want to act like we have not accomplished any of it. And the first thing out their motherfucking mouth is always, oh, our ideology, our bias, we worked from a commitment and an ulterior motive. I am so glad that Dr. Ehrman put it plain. He may not be a ranter and a raver like yours truly, but he said point blank period, I find this shit incredibly insulting. Christians, stop acting like you are not insulting people, and therefore you don't understand why motherfuckers are ready to go upside your dumbass head. You walk into my house, spit on my floor, and act like the structure around you wasn't supported by my labor, we are going to have a motherfucking personal problem. Grow the fuck up. This shit is ridiculous. 100%.
To deconvert anybody. I never try to deconvert any of my students or to convert them to my points of view. My view is that if somebody's a Christian, that's great. Why
Absolutely.
not? I mean, I'm not, but I have no problem with people being a Christian, but I think that it's better to be an informed Christian and to have knowledge about the past and knowledge about the Bible. The opposite of an informed Christian is an ignorant Christian. And why would you want to be an ignorant Christian? And so this kind of historical knowledge doesn't make somebody a non-Christian. These views that I have of the Gospels, I had for years while I was still a Christian, a church-going, Sunday school teaching Christian. And so I may not have been a fundamentalist, but I certainly was a Christian. And so to say that you can't hold these things and be a Christian is just ignorant. And so I don't know Mike Winger, and I don't know why he'd be attacking me like this. But yeah, I have a pretty good suspicion because when I was a fundamentalist, I probably would have been attacking me too. But it's better not to be a fundamentalist.
Okay, well, is this upcoming Mark course equally valuable for Christians and non-Christians as well?
Oh, yeah. No. The point of this course is not to make somebody, to deconvert somebody. This is to provide information. And this information is, anybody can check out this information. I'll be talking about what Mark says. And you can disagree with everything in it, but I mean, it'd be ridiculous to reject something you haven't even heard yet. And so I'm really interested in knowing Mark's point of view. If Mark is presenting a story about Jesus, and it's important to give Mark his own integrity. You know, when Mike Winger writes a book, which I assume he does, it would not really do him justice to say that he's saying the same thing as Bart Ehrman says in one of his books. We are different authors. And even if you have two scholars writing something, you should read what each one says, because one might be saying something different. So that's how I treat the Gospels. I just want to know what Mark says and what it probably means. Mark is my favorite gospel. This is not a course driven by hate. I love the Gospel of Mark. It is my favorite book of the Bible, one of my favorite. I think it's fantastic. And I think most people completely misunderstand it because they simply assume it's like a condensed version of Matthew or something. And so they don't even bother seeing what its distinctive emphases are. But when you see them, you realize this is a work of genius. And that's what I'll be talking about.
Excellent. To enroll now in this 8-lecture course from the world-class scholar, Dr. Bart Ehrman, check it out at tinyurl.com/bartmark, BARTMARK, to learn more. And if you order from that link, you'll also be helping this channel, which I greatly appreciate. Thanks as always, Dr. Ehrman, for coming on and clearing things up.
Thanks, Paul. See ya.
For another Team Up with Bart, tap on the link on screen now, and I'll see you over there. Until next time, later.
All right, gang, check out these courses. I don't know how this works. I guess once after it's shot, I guess what happens is you're enrolled, and so I'm sure you get the yeah, because I'm sure it's after the live recording. So yeah, you get lifetime access to the recordings and stuff. So if anybody's interested in this, fuck it, let's drop a fucking link on them. If you like it, then you should have put a link on it. Yeah, y'all like that. Y'all like that. I know y'all like that. That was slick. That was slick. That was slick. Christians, y'all gotta stop being so fucking sad. It really is so interesting that this dynamic now is happening where Christians have to demand that other Christians stay in the dark about Christianity. At some point, I actually think we should give the apologists credit. We really should. I hate to say it, but in many ways, they lead the charge. They really do, y'all. I would not have recognized so many of the problems with arguments for theism if it wasn't for dumbass apologists making the arguments. I would not have realized all the ways in which you could bumble the sciences if not for these morons. And I have to, at some level, think that they do get it. They're not as dumb as they sound. The way I was thinking about it as they were wrapping up that last video is what scholars should do. Good scholarship, irrespective of topic, irrespective of discipline, is present you with the information. Present you with what is going on. And then allow you to make up your own mind about what you're going to do with that information. But apologetics comes from a place that is not about education. It's about recruitment and retention, right? It's specifically retention. It's about getting this flock to stay in. So everything's a threat. And so what does it say when you literally get to the point where you have to try to deny your flock the truth about the book you supposedly worship? It's so sad. But that's how this works. But the irony is the Bart Ehrman fans and those who've already been exposed to Bart Ehrman in Mike Winger's audience have probably already been there, done that, got the T-shirt. But the people who haven't, he's actually like introducing Bart Ehrman to them. And I think a lot of them are more likely now to look into what's going on and what it's about, which is why he has to poison the well with the atheism bullshit and just a lot of the way he misleads about Bart Ehrman. But again, like, we should give them credit. Like, they do recognize these threats to their operation, and they call it out, and they try to head it off at the pass, right? They try to cut us from going out, from taking these exit routes. They try to cut off our exit routes before we can, even get started. Shut down the off ramps. So that kind of does tell us where our attention needs to be, or where we can be paying attention to make a difference, because they're kind of signaling, hey man, if people really think about these things, people really get into this, it's really gonna undermine their faith. So that whole insecurity thing is really interesting. I also think Bart's a hustler, man, and I mean that and neutrally, right? Bart's a hustler, and it's just interesting. He's in a little bit different of a space than I am, given that his stuff is about history or whatever. Sorry, I just needed to adjust the stand here. It's about to fall off the table here. That would be very, very bad. So it's kind of interesting. I've always admired the fact that he seems to keep like a legit, like, full-time academic day job, teaching department shit, doing his work and all of that, and then does everything with his books and his blog and his all of the sort of presence and entrepreneurship. I think he's really built up in all of his engagements and appearances. I do think it's again, I think there's this whole really interesting spectrum of academic work, and we could get more into it. It's something I try to bring up once in a while. It really deserves its own stream. But like right now, well, I don't know. I guess I'm somewhere on the spectrum. I know, like, my Rob Pennock sees a lot of what I'm doing is kind of entrepreneurial. I think we're getting, I guess, more towards that. But I see myself as more like Bart, like a more like traditional academic, as opposed to someone like Richard Carrier, who's like a independent outside the academic circles, right? And he's just doing something different. So I like to see what everybody does, and it's interesting to think about Bart doing his own courses. He's been doing that for a while. I think Derek is seeing other academics try this model out. I know he took Richard Carrier's Google class the same time I did, on the Historicity of Jesus class. It was a good experience, and so it's just kind of interesting to watch that YouTube University, as I call it, that kind of marketplace of ideas out here get developed, and see how different people are creating educational products from it. I actually think it's all really, really exciting. I would do much more of that, even just to review the content. Like, if I had more disposable income and the time to dedicate to it, who knows? I'm so busy. So I don't see it changing anytime soon. But yeah, it'd be nice to have more time to go through those type of things and review them, and just to even get better ideas about how to deliver some of the academic content that I'm interested in, like doing classes and stuff like that. But yeah, let me get ready to get up out of here. Appreciate y'all. Want to yeah, he seems like a really hard worker. Absolutely. But yeah, it was just kind of interesting the way the Christians are so alarmed about people getting informed about their own faith. That insecurity is really telling. It's really, really telling. And also, y'all, this is also funny because Maybe Bart Ehrman addresses it in other times. I don't really know, but Jesus is such a clear misguider himself, and I actually think that's where the creativity comes in, right? Because maybe there was stories of Jesus, and yeah, maybe he died, maybe it was real, maybe he died, maybe there's stories of him. I don't know. I literally don't know. I don't know why I should be expected to know, but I don't know. And as the legendary stories of him get developed and shared, especially the new divinity, right? Whatever that evolution of that narrative looks like, right? To from it's almost like, did it go from literal resurrection to spiritual resurrection to then literal and spiritual resurrection? Like whatever those type of deals are, right? That's what I see in that story, that crafting. How do you, wouldn't it be great if we had the story of Jesus's death? And so maybe there's proto stories or precursor stories. But my point is that that's what those fine details do. They get to those moments, just like any movie, where people who watch are going to get to those moments, those critical story points, and they need to see what happens in those moments. You're not going to be able to dodge certain scenes, right? And then you have to craft the story in a way that serves the theology that you're working to get at, without, betraying anything that's publicly known. And your hero Jesus has to, you're just telling a story. And so, of course, Jesus has these well-crafted, ambiguous lines and way of speaking that is a literary device, right? It serves so that the characters around him are the ones who have to take the agency for his fate, which feeds into the narrative of him being blameless. Now, it's clearly ridiculous because, again, if the story was true, Jesus is a manipulative asshole. But that'd be a sin, right? It'd be wrong if Jesus was manipulating everybody in the situation. So instead, he just gets presented as, saying things that are, this like lie by omission wordplay game that he does, which is the same thing Christians do to us right now. But that's very obvious when you're not a believer, because you go back and you see how the story was put together to keep the veils on you. It's just alarming that believers don't see this. They don't see that they wrote the story to fool you about what was going on in the story. And of course, Jesus has to be completely innocent of all this. It's just a very part of the fucking story they're trying to tell with him. And so his dialogue just suits it. But anyway, y'all, it's been fun. Let me get up out of here. I do need to get on this writing project that I have, and I just want to say I appreciate the support from all of you guys. We are in Gather at the Bundy Ranch, so if you want to come hang out, the link is in the description and it's pinned in the chat. And we'll probably be here overnight because I'll be working and then just hanging out later. And I want to make myself some dinner later on. But I really appreciate you guys tuning in. Please like the video. Please subscribe to the channel. Please share the channel with other people who might be interested in the content. Also, there should be a link in the description for Discord. Join our Discord so you can hang out with the community offline. And once we get a feel for who you are in the guest room, we can invite you to become one of our members and gather as well. So Thank you all so much. We'll see you next time. In the name of the Darwin, the Dawkins, and the Christopher Hitchens, science bless you all. Poof!
Zach, why she wanna leave me alone? Saying all I do is wrong. No rights when they been left turns. Playing that she gotta let it burn. Saying that the hell's not a home. Sunshine cause you heard it all before. Sometimes she don't wanna be alone. Most times she don't want me gone. She don't know I try my all. She don't know I sprung in the sun, but I'm going in the winter, so we good to the fall. Remember how I told you I get it and I win. Now I'm got it, you ain't answering my call. Wonder if I've been moving too strong. Maybe I just been moving too boss. Really hate when the feeling get lost. Nowadays she just dodge my calls. In the game throwing laws like Paul. Young legend Miss John like Wall. And I wish you never met like Call. Dick game lay it down like law. Made plans but you canceled them all. I was just trying to splurge in the mall. Now I'm home stacking bread till you call.
It's time to roll. She tryna slide. We smoking Zah. Stop acting shy. Cause you a demon when I get between your thighs, girl. You like my rib, you know I need you by my side, girl. It's time to roll. She tryna ride. We smoking. Stop acting shy. Cause you a demon when I get between your thighs, girl. You like my rib, you know I need you by my side, girl.
Be smoking that side. I'm trying to get high. She said that she not ready for love, stop wasting my time. I got demons in my closet, I can't hide. I did all my exes wrong, they wish I died. Damn, I tried. They won't believe me when I say this. Oh my God, what a blessing. Hello Phoenix, that's my twin. I told these hoes they won't get my heart again, not again. Cause they were missing when I needed just a friend.
They were missing, yeah.